Sir Henry. This is your stage.
This is a story by Nathaniel Barron, whom you already heard tonight. It's called Early Retirement. Kerstin is one of those seemingly ageless women. On any given day, she might look 40 or 50 or even 60, depending on the lighting and how much of her orange tits happen to be hanging out of her Ed Hardy shirt. Today, they are at full exposure, and the other students in the class, a 16-year-old boy and a middle-aged tax accountant named Günther, are having trouble focusing. Günther's pretending not to look, cupping his hands over his face as though thinking extremely deeply about his answer, but I can see him peeking through his slightly splayed fingers. Tobias, on the other hand, the 16-year-old, is making no such attempts. He stares at them openly with his mouth slightly agape, like a malnourished infant. I try to turn their attention elsewhere. The lesson today is about jobs. We're getting nowhere because Tobias is only 16 and doesn't have one, and because Günther's job description is putting everyone to sleep. We haven't been able to figure out what Kerstin does for a job yet. When asked, she had said something cryptic like, "I've had many different jobs. Once I worked for a guy who paid me to answer his phones." "Oh, so you were a secretary," I had replied, trying foolishly to manufacture something that resembled learning. "A secretary," I repeated slowly. "No, not really," she had replied, and then stared at me blankly for a full minute. This is a little game I like to play. If my students have decided they aren't going to talk to me, I just stare back at them for as long as it takes, checking my watch every so often as if to say, no, still no one. Sometimes I'll raise an eyebrow or do that strange closed-mouth smile where you open your eyes really wide and tilt your head to the side. Or I'll whistle a tune, usually after I've gone through just about every facial tic I can think of. Someone finally pipes up just to end the sheer misery of it all. When I first got here, I used to be very American about this, languishing under the awkwardness of the silence and thus filling it with my own nervous babble. But now I've learned to be utterly ruthless with them. I can take it as long as they can. I am like a Buddhist monk when it comes to spiteful silence. The other students, as I've mentioned, are too occupied with Kerstin's cleavage to mind the silence. Kerstin, for her part, is contentedly chomping away on a piece of gum, swinging her jaw from side to side, not unlike a cow. Her lips seem like something must have been done to them. Fat injections or Botox or whatever else you can do to a pair of lips these days. And all of the pursing and stretching involved with chewing makes them look grotesque. She's drawn a border around them with a makeup pencil, trying to create a Cupid's bow where there clearly isn't one. Now she's opened her mouth and is stretching her gum across the tip of her slowly protruding tongue as though daring me to say something. It's too much. She's won. "So then, Kerstin," I say, clearing my throat, "what is your current job?" "Don't know current," she says, disinterestedly, chomping away. A tiny ringlet of black and platinum-dyed hair has come loose from the tangled mess of hairspray and bobby pins perched on top of her head, and she twirls it absent-mindedly between her French-tipped fingers. "Actuel," I translate. "Ah," she says, as a look of recognition washes over in her face. She sits up a bit straighter in her chair, and Tobias's eyes open a bit wider. "Current job is, none," she says proudly. She smiles as she says this, and I'm not sure if she's smiling because she's unemployed or because she remembered the word none. "So you're unemployed then?" I say, hardly surprised. "No, not unemployed. Rented." She smiles again and snaps her gum at me. "You mean retired, I think." "I'm not tired." "No, not tired, retired. Pensioniert is retired." "Oh, okay, I tired then." "Retired, yes." she says, smiling and nodding. Günther's head perks up at this. We are now in his wheelhouse, and his Prussian sense of social order kicks into high gear. Not allowed, he says, one finger rising into the air. Pension is allowed first after 65. As I said, Kerstin looks more like a piece of beef jerky than a human being, and so it is difficult to gauge how old she is. But she is certainly not 65. Günther looks seriously indignant. Tobias looks bored. Kerstin seems pleased that she has succeeded in rocking the boat. She smiles coyly and says, well, I special. Special? How? Günther demands. Pension first after 65. Well, I special. She repeats. Special? How? Günther demands again. I begin rubbing my temples. I feel like I'm caught in some sort of cosmic loop, a rift in the space-time continuum, torn open by the enormously high concentration of idiocy in such a small space. In my experience, this can go on for hours. I special, how special, I special, special how. This is how people go insane. I say, Kerstin! I say, perhaps a bit too aggressive. What do you mean you are special? Kerstin's eyes open a bit wider at this, suggesting she is either surprised or aroused by my sudden assertiveness. I shoot Günther a look that says, I will ask her, you shut up. I have a disease, she says, placing undue emphasis on the word disease. I can already feel the dread welling up inside me again. Disease and illness in general is a bad subject in this country. Well, no, that's not entirely right. I suppose it's a bad subject in every country. It is disease, after all. It's just that in my country, it's not a subject. In my 4 years as a teacher here, I've heard descriptions of every disease, from herpes to hemorrhoids. I've been told that it's because of my flippant American way of asking overly personal questions, but I still refuse to believe that a suitable answer to my question, how was your weekend, should involve an overly detailed description of personal suffering. If it's anything other than a cold or the flu, it's probably too personal / depressing to talk about it with your English teacher, so just say that you were sick. Some would say this makes me shallow and unable to discuss real issues. I say it's just me trying not to have my day ruined before 10 a.m. I try to imagine what Kerstin's disease could be, to get myself prepared for the worst. It seriously better not be something terminal or something sexual, or I'm getting up and walking out. I say, trying my best to sound concerned and sincere, even though all I feel is a sinking sensation that class is about to derail. And, what is it? What is it that you suffer from? I have burnout, she says the final word with an over-exaggerated tone of gravity, and nods her head slowly as if to say, I know, I'm such a brave soul. You have what? I say. The dread suddenly turns to confusion. Burnout? You mean there's a problem with your car? No, Günther says in a very serious tone. He adjusts the frame of his circular-rimmed glasses and leans in closer to me. His bald head picks up the reflection of the fluorescent lights above. Burnout is a psychological problem. It is very serious. Very, very serious. He shoots Kerstin a sympathetic look. Yes, Kerstin says, soaking in his pity. All was too much. All was too much. Now I am tired. Retired, I remind her. She just closes her eyes and continues nodding slowly as if reliving some unseen pain. This was during my early, heady days here in the Hauptstadt, when I assumed that all cultural differences could simply be ironed out through rigorous discussion and debate. What a sad, sad fool I was. Wait a second, I counter, forging ahead bravely. So you got tired of working, and so you stopped? That doesn't really sound like a disease to me. If not wanting to go to work was a disease, then no one would do anything ever. No, says Günther. It is a very bad disease. People work too hard, and then he made the kaput gesture with his hands. Okay, I see your point, I say. But don't you see the potential for exploitation here? How do you distinguish between those who really do need psychological treatment and those who, well, just don't want to go to work anymore? What happens if you get burnout in the US? It's not called burnout, I say. We call it a nervous breakdown. And when we get one, we take a week off or something and go sit on a beach somewhere and reevaluate our lives, but then eventually go back to work. And if you can go back to work, Günther asks, well then your problem probably isn't fatigue then. It's just that you don't like your job or you don't like working. Günther isn't satisfied with my answer. Kerstin seems to have understood none of it and has gone back to happily snapping her gum. She shoots Tobias a playful, seductive look across the table and he nearly chokes. Class is nearly over. But I'm not finished. In retrospect, I shudder at my callousness, even as I have to grudgingly admire my idealism, thinking that I was going to permanently resolve hundreds of years of cultural differences from this tiny little classroom just off the Dorotheenstraße. So, Günther, I say, what if I were to have a class which, let's just say for the sake of argument, drove me insane with their staggering level of ineptitude? And what if one Monday morning I just snapped and decided that I couldn't take it anymore, that I was never going to get out of bed ever again because I couldn't bear to see their drooling faces and listen to their unending bullshit? And what if I decided that in fact they had damaged me to such a degree that I was pretty sure I would never be able to hold down a stable job again, because every time I went to work I would have a debilitating fear that everyone I met was going to tell me a depressing story about their own pet illness, whether real or imaginary. Would you then be willing to pay a portion of your taxes so that I could sit home and thoroughly devote my life to facelifts and fake tanning? I'm nearly panting by this point. And I find that I've nearly risen out of my chair. Tobias, whom my little tirade seems to have roused from the hypnotic trance of Kerstin boobs, politely raises his hand to signal that he would like to speak. I have to laugh at the demonstration of civility and respect which is so out of place in the classroom, but I am nonetheless touched. Yes, Tobias, I say gently. Kerstin, what was your job, before you burned out? Currywurst, she says simply. What? I say, slowly sinking back into my seat. Currywurst, she repeats stone-faced. You know it? Of course, I take a deep breath and try to lower my voice. Of course I know it, but what are you talking about? My job, she says. She pauses for a moment and reaches up to touch her hair, patting it ever so slightly to make sure that everything is in place. Satisfied, she returns her attention to the class. I buy currywurst. No, wait, I sell currywurst. Yes, I sell currywurst. She looks at me and smiles, but now I'm tired.